It's a bucket. And this is a bowl, right? Yeah. Do you know what you do with a bucket, Malachi? Can you show Malachi what we're going to do? Look at this, Malachi. That's right. So what's happened is we're going to pour water in here, but look what's going to happen. What's happening? How come? I have holes in my bucket. What happens when you have holes in your bucket? The water goes through. But how can I fill up my bucket, do you think, Levi? You're going to do it for me? Okay. Yeah, you want to hold the bucket? Sure. And you hold the water. Okay, this is going to work well. Yeah, good. That's right. Okay, you're going to hold it all by yourself? Okay, yeah, sure. There you go. There, yeah. So, what happens here with this bucket? Yeah, you're going to hold it. Okay, you got it with 2 hands? Perfect. Okay. So what happens with the bucket is that the water goes through. And Levi and Malachi, do you guys know that you guys are buckets? Yes. Your bodies are buckets. And do you know what we fill our bodies with? Things to eat and things to sleep. And we learn things, don't we? We learn things from the books we read, and we learn things when we listen to our teachers and our mommy and our daddy. But what happens to all the stuff that comes out? It's pouring out. So what do we have to do? We have to keep filling our bucket, don't we? What happens when all the water goes out? But there's no more, so what happens? It's empty, isn't it? I think we've had enough water, but you're right. You could get more water from the sink. But how do we fill ourselves up? How do we fill ourselves up? Yeah, you can put some more water in it and let it go down for a couple minutes. Yeah, you show them. That's it. So we fill ourselves up by making sure we have food to eat and we have sleep and we have lots of learning. Do you guys go somewhere where people teach you things? Yeah, do you go to daycare and you learn things, or school? Lily probably goes to school. Yeah, and I learn things too. And we have to keep our buckets full. Okay, so that's what we're going to learn about. Can you guys repeat the prayer after me? Yeah, okay, say, Dear God, thank you for today. Thank you for buckets. You say thank you for buckets. And help to keep our buckets full. And help us know that you love us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys. Okay. the ragged edge, decreasing the frame. And some of the reasons why we're often run ragged in life are little ones, but they're part of the fun as well. What are your first impressions when you see the ragged edge decreased the frame? And after hearing that song, what do you think I'm going to talk about? How we protect ourselves, armor, yeah, good thoughts, yeah. Basically, all kinds of ways that our buckets can be emptied and our lives can be a little frazzled. And it's very interesting that a tapestry looks so beautiful. This is a tapestry of a crown. I always think of a crown because I am a princess of the Most High God, so I always wear my crown, right, honey? So a beautiful tapestry is so well made that rather than looking at the fabric and seeing it, we just look at the picture and we're always amazed at it. We marvel at the workmanship, we look at how beautiful it is, we wonder about the time it took, but then when you look at the back of the tapestry, you see the mess. You can see all the threads, you can still see the outline of the image, but there's all kinds of noise. There's different colors, there's different pieces, and if one loose thread's pulled, it's no big deal. But all of a sudden, if a lot are pulled, the whole tapestry can unravel. And if you guys have cats like I do, they can often, pull at things, and the next thing, whether it's a sweater that has a hole in it or something else. Now, I don't embroider, but I did make this quite a few years ago. And I put this together, but what you can't see is called stained glass quilting. It's the only kind of quilting I would ever try because all those black lines, they keep you from seeing all my fraying edges and how terrible the piecing together looks. And actually I ended up having a friend sew the rest of the black things on me because once again, I'm not very good at this stuff. But you don't realize when you're doing something how ugly sometimes the back of something, because we're often hiding the back and hiding what's not seen. Because what can happen is we can become frayed. And so the definition of frayed is worn or shredded at the ends or edges, like frayed jeans. And of course, that's very stylish right now. Not that I have any frayed jeans, but lots of people do. Or damaged, weakened, or worn down by strain or irritation, frayed. So your nerves are frayed. So when our tapestry is well tended, when we have love for our tapestry, when we love the things that we're taking care of, we keep them well tended, we keep them up. And the image of our faith can reflect that too. When well tended, we reflect God in everything we do. But when we're ragged and worn out, our reflection isn't quite as intense as it was before. Let's read together Genesis 1:27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Just think about all the threads that God has woven to create the tapestry of you. We look at Ed, the tapestry of Ed. He has different threads that have woven him than the threads that have woven me. And all of us are such individual pieces of God's workmanship that it's incredible. And then in Psalm, another one of my favorites, Psalm 139:13, feel free to read if you would like. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. As you can see by the kids running around, I have a couple grandsons, and it was fun to watch, Amy, and as she grew, as the babies grew inside of her, and you knew that those little cells that were so small just started dividing and dividing and dividing and making these amazing children. And seeing that each one is so different, same parents, very different children, and just to see how we all grow, just like we're all so different. And God knows what each one of us is going to be filled with. And in all of time, there will never be two people exactly alike. Even identical twins are not alike. And many who know me, primarily my husband, would say that's a good thing, that there's not two of me, right, honey? Yeah. Because, I'm not sure what would happen. But how do we take care of our tapestry And how do we help others take care of theirs? Any ideas? Any ideas? I said it before, when we take care of something, when our possession, when it's something we care for, what do we do for it? We really love it. We show it love by cherishing it, by taking care of it. If it's our favorite outfit, we wash it and hang it to dry as opposed to throwing it in the dryer. We keep it away from the cats so it doesn't have cat hair. You may not all have that same experience, but I do. But the thing is, the biggest single thing we can do to help us and others is love. And love, not the romantic, we have a great feeling, you feel kind of, everything feels great. But the no matter what, the unconditional love, the love like Jesus gives to each one of us. That unconditional love will keep our tapestries, our faithful tapestries, our bodies, our tanks will keep us full. And so we really think about the buckets that we have. And I was really impacted earlier in my ministry. I used to go to a lot of these leadership summits through Bill Hybels' church called Willow Creek, and he does these summits every year. And I met this speaker through the summit, so through the online. His name is Wayne Cordero, and he is a pastor from Hawaii. And he had one of the most brilliant talks about his tank. And it's one of the things, a lot of my life actually has been shaped by some of the stuff I learned from his little session. And he talked about how his church in Hawaii, they had a few different campuses, the church was growing, people were coming, he was out doing ministry all the time, he had things going on, he felt like, yes, I'm doing God's work all the time, but he wasn't filling his own tank. So even though some of those things did fill him tank, a lot of other things drained his tank. And he actually suffered a bit of a nervous breakdown, he ended up going to a monastery where it was all silence. He took a big retreat. He kind of started working on himself because he realized that he didn't keep his tank filled. Each one of us has a tank. I drive towards empty a lot more regularly than I should, so I have actually run out of gas. So I know what it feels to run out of gas and have to call CAA or your husband to come and bring you gas. So just like each of our lives, if we don't have the right nutrition, we don't have the energy. We don't sleep well, we don't have the energy. Same with our spiritual lives. If we're not connected to the source, if we're not connected to God, then our tanks constantly get emptied. And we're supposed to empty our tanks, but we're not supposed to completely empty them. If we always had a full tank, and we always felt, yeah, everything's great, got a full tank, but we didn't do anything to empty that tank, that water would get stagnant. And then that tank would end up becoming kind of gucky, just like water when you leave it in a pool without a circulation system. Same thing with our tanks. We need to use them, but we do have to fill them again. So in order to really show love, we really need to know about love. Because the way that I see that people love me is different than the way other people want to be loved. And so I also had another book that I really enjoyed is Gary Chapman, and he talked about the 5 love languages. And it's talked about love languages for family, for spouses, but for all relationships and how important it is. And so one of the first love languages that we can do to kind of fill our tank is speak love. So words of affirmation. So they can be compliments, they can be a little kindness you say to someone, they can kind of be, oh, I think you're really great at this, I would really like your help on this because I've seen that you do it so well, so that you're actually making a difference as to how people are feeling about themselves. And people who have this as their love language, they just feel so much love when you appreciate them and appreciate what, they've done for you, all this stuff, supporting their hopes and dreams, all that stuff, that shows them they're loved. The next one is quality time. This is one my husband really enjoys. It's kind of one of the way he really knows that I love him. Before COVID-19, I wasn't at my house very much. I was either out with friends, out at work, doing stuff for church, on the go, because I'm a very go, let's get moving type person. whereas he enjoys to just unwind, sit at home, maybe watch some television shows together. So this quality time is so important to him. And I've discovered during this time that, you know, when I unplug and we just sit there, even if I really don't like the show, or even if I really don't care if I'm watching the show, because we're doing it together, it really fills his tank. And so since COVID, our relationship's been so much better because I'm home a bit more. So I think we're both really worried what's going to happen when things are even more opened up. But I'm hoping to learn the lesson of that I need to spend more time. And it's undivided attention that's really important. Our phones, I love, oh, my flashlight's on, sorry. I love my phone a lot. It's, everything is in here, my schedule, all this stuff. But when you set down the phone, Levi, my grandson, he looks at me, Nana, put it in your pocket. And if I don't put it in my pocket, he will take it away from me, and, hence, it's not always great. But he understands that it's the quality. You really need to spend that time. And it may feel like a bit of a sacrifice, but for the person that really is receiving that, it's a huge gift you can give them. Another way is to give love, receiving gifts. The one that I really like, but it's the thought that counts. We've often heard that, right? And when you give someone something, you're thinking about them. You're thinking about what they like or what they would enjoy. So it doesn't have to be a big thing, but it's the fact that you thought, and when you came back, whether you come back from a trip, like Ed, if you're away on a trip and you said, oh, this reminded me of Janice, and on the way home you're like, here, this is for you. I don't know if you ever do that, but if you do, all the time. See, then you're thinking of her, and it means that where you are, you're thinking about that person. It's a representation of thought. So when you choose that gift, you're really looking at that person's likeness and all that stuff, and it's the gesture that's everything. The gift, it doesn't often have to be expensive. It can just be a little thing. Mind you, honey, don't think about that for Christmas. Yeah. Expensive is good too, just saying, jewelry, all that, yeah. But gifts do make you feel special, for sure. But some people, really, they don't like to get gifts. They almost don't like to receive them because that's not their love language. And that's why you need to know with each other. Service. Serve others, serve love, acts of service. As followers of Christ, he modeled this for us in a very real way. He served his followers, and he serves. He came to serve, and so we can serve. So it's one person doing things for another person without prompting. If I have to tell you to take the garbage off the steps and put it away, it's not an act of service. No, you don't have to get up and do it right now, honey, that's okay. But it's the things you do, like Kevin always says, oh, your tires need to be changed, or oh, I think it might be soon time for you to have an oil change, or all those things that they just do to show their love. And you have to sometimes recognize that that's what it is. It's an act of love. Feeding the cat, changing a litter box, that would be an amazing act of service, just saying. And the main act is, the message is it's the consideration that you did, and that's what fills that person's tank. And the last love language from Gary Chapman's book is embracing love, the physical touch. We're living in a world right now where people are scared to touch each other. We're not even sure if we should handshake anymore, and I'm a physiotherapist. I work with my hands. It's what I do. I touch people. I need to figure out if their joints are sore. I need to show them how to do a move. I need to do this stuff. And so it's a really different world to be scared about what that touch is and extra things, gloves, sanitization, all that stuff. But physical touch is one of the most important ways to show that you love someone. Whether it's a hug, and I'm a hugger. Everybody who knows me knows I'm a hugger, and COVID has been really hard on that. And so the brain transforms all those signals. We have so many touch receptors on our body. Like, it's amazing. When I learned the body and I did in the anatomy lab, and all the nerve endings that are on every bit of our skin, the nerve endings that are in our muscles, that are in our bones, we have nerves everywhere. And so that's why that touch means so much, and it sends those impulses. And of course, different touches send different impulses, but you really want to make sure it's that right kind of touch. And that's why for some people, especially right now, staying back and not touching them is showing them love too, because you don't want to pass on anything that may be around. So yeah. So that's just kind of a little pictorial representation of some of them. So obviously, if we try to do all 5 of these regularly for everybody we come across, our tanks would be empty. But Jesus didn't do everything for everybody. He had 12 disciples. He was really close with 3 of them. And then he had like a slightly larger group that were in kind of the closer inner circle with the disciples. And then there was all the crowds that he taught. And so he showed love wherever he went, but he did go deeper with some. Just like each of these, you're not going to know everybody's love languages. The people that are closer in your life, like I know that my good friend Ursula, she really doesn't like to receive gifts because she's like, well, you don't need to do that for me. She'd rather give you something and do something for you. But I know other ways that she will appreciate, whether it's a text or something. So you start to know the people who are closer to you, just like you should know your spouses and your children and all that very well. And so then you see that filling up people's tank with love is one way that they are energized. It's one way to prevent the fraying. But what's another way? What about small group ministry? It's vital to decreasing the fraying, as the Word of God has so much knowledge in it that we all need to study it regularly. Dr. Frank Guinta, who was our interim pastor, he was always saying, a small group is a group that is small, meaning that it doesn't need to be magic to be a small group or a home group. It means it can be an AV group. Scott would love to have an AV group, and they could become a little small group. It could be people who are interested in the children's ministry that meet together, do a common purpose, but they spend a little bit of time praying together and encouraging each other. It can be Bible study groups like what the young adults are going to be doing, where they're really going to get to know each other and then know when people are hurting and need that. Because it's genuine interest, it's prayer, and it's a common goal. Even a team huddle could be really good. Jesus modeled community, and he did pour himself into his small group. And throughout his whole ministry, he was preoccupied with loving people in whatever group, in whatever way. In Joshua 1:8, it says, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful." Whether we read it on our own, which is great, we need to do that, we need to be in the Word on our own, but you've got one perspective. That's why it's so important to read the Bible with others, and to have all kinds of mentors and leaders that can help. Gifts and talents is another thing. I know areas I'm gifted in, I know areas I am not. Financially is an area I am not gifted in. But other things I can be gifted in. So a great part of people's spiritual health and wellness is ministry being in a place that is a good match. The right person in the right place. When I'm doing ministry, when I'm up here chatting, this is actually a tank filler for me. Because I love to talk, and I love if there's a crowd, and it just makes me invigorated and full of pep and vigor. But if I'm alone by myself for too long, I just, my cats, I think, talk back to me then, because it's not as a tank filler for me. Because God's created each one of us as a special purpose in a special way. So what are your spiritual gifts? Like, do you know? Have you thought about it? Nancy was here at the first service, and one of the things that she is very spiritually gifted in is encouraging others. She's very good at coming up behind and saying, "Oh, I really like what you did there." Or, "Oh, do you, and just even if it's a little note card sometimes or a little call. God doesn't always call us to do what's easy. So sometimes we're doing things that might not be our most giftedness. That drains the tank a little more. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Just means we have to be aware so that we're always filling the tank too. And so you always have to realize it's always nice if you know what your gifts are, but there's tons of ways to find out if you're really not sure what your spiritual gifts are. 1 Corinthians 12:4 says, "There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work." So it doesn't matter what your gift is. Some of us may think, "Oh, I've got lots," or "I don't have any," or "I only have a few." But each part of our body is so vital, and that's why it's so important to use your gift for God, whatever gift that may be. And one of my favorite areas is prayer. Didn't always used to be one of my favorite areas, but it definitely is. In Acts 2:42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Prayer. They devoted themselves to prayer. Prayers in some of the translations. And also they prayed all the time. They prayed in private. They prayed in public. They had prayer seasons. They had prayer times. They looked at specific prayer ideas. And prayer is vital. And I used to, I grew up saying, now I lay me down to sleep at night. I grew up saying, God is great, God is good. Let's thank for the food at meals. It took me a while to kind of learn how to pray specifically and pray for certain things. And then to get comfortable praying out loud, in front of a couple people and then a lot of people. But the more you practice it, the more a skill and the easier you feel about it. Because Jesus modeled this to us. This isn't something that we just think we need to do. It's vital to filling our tanks, to keeping us from fraying and being ragged around the edges. We really need this prayer and solitude. And some of my favorite prayer verses, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray continually. And, I've had a car accident, falling asleep at the wheel, so I wouldn't say to close your eyes while you pray. I wish I could say I was praying while I was driving that time, but I actually fell asleep. But you want to pray continually, but that just means you keep every thought captive. It doesn't mean you have to put yourself in eyes closed. It just means you're always thinking about that, keeping that connection open. And Luke 18:1, then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. That parable was the persistent widow. And it's always one of my favorite ones because I can be a bit tenacious and persistent about things. Yeah, I know you're shaking your head, honey. I know you've never noticed that, have you? And so I may email, even if I don't hear from people, or just kind of, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? But Jesus has told us that we need to ask for things consistently, even if we think we're not being heard or we think things aren't changing. It's so important to continue being persistent. So some of my little conclusions, we need to be a lifeguard. We need to be a lifeguard for ourselves and for each other. And that's why it's so important to be in those small groups and to be together. Because you yourself knows, this week, I was coming in, I knew I was going to be talking this week. Well, I've had one of my worst weeks at work. I got into conflict with a coworker. I have a meeting Monday morning with my manager because of that conflict with a coworker. I was really, it's not been it's been kind of a stressful week in many ways, a busy week in many ways. But I think a part of it might have been God, testing me about what's going on, what are you talking about, are you talking from what you know? And also, the deceiver's out there. Satan is out there. There's all kinds of things that can happen that end up, it could have derailed me. And I said, I am not the right person to come up here and talk about this. Look at, my life's falling apart right now, or I feel that way. But that's when it's more important to come up and talk about this, because regardless of what's happened, I've now gone to some Bible verses. I've kind of looked at some things to say, you know what, I was a little too assertive in that meeting. I did say things that were probably a little hurtful, and I've had time to reflect so that when I have my meeting with my manager, I can say very humbly, yeah, I probably was a little too out there. I probably pushed the point a little too hard. I know I can do that. And so God's telling me that I need to do that, because if not, it's going to fray the relationships of my coworkers and me, and it's going to continue to then come home. And I actually thought about it at home a lot more than I normally do. I try to be in the moment, but it's very important. We all need to experience serenity and simplicity. I am not a lot of serenity and simplicity, and so I'm preaching to myself here as well. And Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. It is, your spiritual well-being is one of the most important parts of our tanks, and the most important parts of keeping us from being ragged, being run down, being frayed. Because your heart and the Spirit and that connection with Jesus just does everything to being able to keep you, especially the world we're living in right now. You need to guard that heart. So just some final little words. I love lists and all that stuff. Respect. It's so important. Jesus basically, well, the Bible tells us we need to respect others. You know, regardless of even if we know them, we're supposed to show respect to each other. And we also, Jesus, he loves us, how we are now. He doesn't want us to stay there. He always wants us to grow and learn, but he's not going to change loving us unconditionally. So we need to respect ourselves, respect others. We need to pray for and with others. Prayer is so amazing. When you pray with somebody else for a specific issue, it's life-changing. And intentionally foster relationships. Jesus didn't have relationships that were close and deep with every single person he came in contact with. Just like we can't know everybody's love language, we can't do all that stuff. You're going to have superficial relationships, people that you just kind of know a little bit. But the ones that he's put in your inner circle, your family, your close groups, your knits, the ones that God's kind of given to you that you need to talk to this person, those are the people that you're supposed to get deeper with and you're really supposed to know and foster those relationships, work on them. Seek out healthy and spiritually mature leaders. I've had so many good mentors through my life, and I'm always looking and learning and gleaning what I can. Realistic expectations. Gee, honey, do I have realistic expectations?
Every day.
Yeah. I have expectations that are out here for myself first, though, usually. And then because I think of it for myself, I often think of it for each other. But really, we need to manage those expectations. And you can't be all things to all people. And offer excellent training for volunteers. This is something that I think we need to get better at here at TBC. We need people to realize about their tanks, about filling it, about helping each other, and really, working in the ministries that they're in. An ongoing conversation about others with the mission and passion of God's church. Because God's church is an amazing place to be. And when you're with people and you're doing ministry together, it just fills the tank in so many ways. But you do need to work and make sure you're working on the mission of God. And so, these three remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Maybe frayed around the edges, but the embroidery, God's love, unconditional through everything, and will really help us to keep solid together.